let's go to
the Audrey. So I'm the other Audrey, and she's the Audrey, so make sure you get that right today. I'm here talking about none other than Audrey Belleghem. So she's Senior Vice President of Operations and General Manager for the Grace Hopper Celebration. Prior to joining Anita Board, Audrey was Chief of Staff to the Executive Vice President of Production Operations at NetUp, a $6 billion company providing innovative storage and data management solutions. In April 2012, Audrey was selected as one of the top 100 women of influence by the San Jose Silicon Valley Business Journal. In June of 2011, she was selected by Tech Women to serve in their inaugural program as a technical mentor. An initiative of the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, Tech Women paired leaders in Silicon Valley with their counterparts in the Middle East and North Africa, and were formally recognized by Hillary Rodham Clinton, U.S. Secretary of State. Audrey is a member of the Industry Advisory Board for the California Polytechnic State University San Luis Obispo Women's Engineering Program. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from UCLA. And a Master's of Business Administration from the Haas School of Business, University of California at Berkeley. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I introduce Audrey Belleghem.
How's this volume? Yeah, it's good? Great, well, I'm happy to be here. My talk today is going to be on how nothing in my life could have been predicted based on when I was here as a student at UCLA 30 years ago, sitting here listening to other speakers tell me how to plan my life and make sure I had its career ladder that made sense. That is not what happened to me, and so I'm going to give you some information and advice as we go through my story. I'll take questions at the end and tell you a little bit about myself. So you've already heard my introduction. At the Anita Borg Institute, or now AnitaB.org as it's called, beyond the Grace Hopper celebration, I actually have additional program responsibilities. For those of you who are familiar with the Sisters community, it's an online global community of women technologists. Over 8,000 women around the world are on this virtual space. We also run communities in 20 cities around the world, most of them in the US, but we have some in Africa and in Europe, so that people can locally congregate and meet each other and support each other. I also run all of operations for AnitaB.org, so that includes metrics, goals, reporting to our board of trustees, so running the business, if you will. So a little bit more about me. I went to UCLA, yay! In electrical engineering. There wasn't a lot of computer science back then. I think I took a class called Pascal, and then that was about all that was offered. So my background is in antenna design theory, RF signals, solid state. My favorite class, I looked up on your course catalog because I know the numbers have changed, but my favorite class was the fundamentals of solid state, which I think is EE 123A, and I love the lab. Any idea why I love the lab? So that guy in the green shirt was my lab partner. So we met here in that class and got married. So we have 3 kids. Went to Berkeley, got my MBA, and we currently live in Silicon Valley. My 2 older daughters went to MIT. The younger daughter's getting her diploma in this photo, so that was just last summer. And then my son's going to go to Cal Poly in the fall. And the reason there's question marks there is both my kids told me that they were not going to be engineers when they majored. The first one said she was going to major in biology, and then she ended up majoring in mechanical engineering. The second one said she was going to major in something called art, culture, and technology, which actually exists at MIT. And she ended up majoring in EECS. So my first question is there anyone here who's majoring in something they did not intend to major in? Okay, so as I wait, more hands are coming in. Yeah, so you don't always know what's going to happen. I certainly didn't think they were going to be engineers. So my son has declared that he is going to major in mechanical engineering, and I don't believe it because no one's ever stayed with the major that they thought they were going to stick with. So that's why he's got question marks. And I don't know, 4 or 5 years, who knows? Okay, so what was my first job? My first job was at a company called Sun Microsystems. Sun built their own chips. They built their own servers and data storage. They were this huge multi-billion-dollar company in Silicon Valley. My summer internship job on the job description, which was posted online, was I'd be doing market research, I'd be looking at tech trends, I'd be looking at what's called IETF standards, which still exist today, and I'd be doing some protocol analytics on how standards were being set for companies that were operating in data centers but had to be able to share files amongst different platforms. So my advice to you, my first set of advice to you is as you come out and you try and determine where to go for your first job or your first internship or whatever decisions that you need to make for your career, go with the company that's exhibiting the most growth. Because in that company, what you will find is what they think you're going to do is not actually what you're going to end up doing. They're growing so fast and there's so many opportunities that when you come in and you're trained and you're ready to pick up additional work, there will be many, many other ways that you can take your career. So as long as you stick with a company that's growing, you're going to have those options. On the contrary, if you go to a company that when you find is shrinking, and I've had that situation as well, what happens is the availability of work becomes constricted. You actually have situations where people will fight for assignments, right? Because you're trying to keep your job and you're trying to make sure you stay busy. And it's less comfortable, there's less resources, you can't really kick off anything new because the company's suffering. So as you look at where to go, you will have more opportunities if you will go with the company that's growing. And so that's what I did. My lab partner, actually at the same time, decided he was going to go another way. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But anyway, I was a young entrepreneur. After I started at Sun Microsystems, I determined that there was this opportunity to have what are called bake-offs or testing events, where companies that have implementations of the same protocol need to connect. And back then there wasn't wireless connection, there wasn't a cloud, right? And so you physically had to bring these materials together, these computers together in the same forum, connect them with Ethernet, and make sure that they could share files. And this was called interoperability testing. And I got so good at setting up those events that upon graduating with my MBA, I was able to create my own business and actually ran interoperability testing events for over a decade. So my second piece of advice is if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to start your own business, the best time to do it is when you're young. It's really important that you not think that it's going to get easier later. You actually get more encumbered. You have other financial responsibilities. Your life can take many, many different turns. So if you've got an interest in starting your own business, do it as soon as you have the experience to do so, and it's not as long as what you think. It was actually the advice of my circuits professor here at UCLA that got me to start my business as early as I did. On our last class, he stood up in front of the class and said, yeah, the next time I see you, you'll be taking your final, but today we're not going to talk about any of the material from the class. We're actually going to talk about how you're going to start your own business. It had nothing to do with circuits. It was so impactful that I remember that. And I took that after MBA school and I started that. And it was a really successful opportunity. By the time these events were done, we had over 200 companies in the San Jose Convention Center. And I had employees. It was a great business. So a little bit side note here. Some stats about being an entrepreneur. In the United States is the best place to be an entrepreneur, to start your own business out of all companies that are ranked to do so. 46% of businesses fail due to incompetence. The fact that you're sitting here means you're not incompetent. You're in one of the best schools in the nation, right? You have already exhibited the capacity and the capability and the mentality, so you're already going to be successful. 30% fail due to lack of managerial experience, so you'll go get that, right? You're gonna have employees, you're gonna have a business, you're not gonna try and manage them for the first time when you are the CEO, right? So you're going to go get that. And then 11%, you know, other stuff. I don't know, fraud, natural disasters. I can't worry about that right now. So if you could just take care of those first two things, you're more than 75% successful. But more importantly, what I find is the third statistic. If you've succeeded prior in a venture, then you have a 30% chance of success in your next venture. If this is the first time you're a business owner, you only have an 18% chance of succeeding. And if you've previously failed, you have a 20% chance of succeeding. So what that means is you have a better chance of succeeding if you've failed previously than if this is your first time. And if you were successful, you even have a better chance. So another reason to start younger is you may not have to only start one company. You might have to do it a couple times before you get it. It gets better as you practice it. So start early so you get those other chances. Now back to my life. So everything was going well. I mean, the dot-com era was booming. The internet's getting adopted. The NASDAQ grows in 5 years over 400%, which is unheard of. And in 1999 alone, Qualcomm had the highest spike in shares. Their shares rose in 1 year 2,619%. So this bubble is just growing and growing and growing. And no one thinks it's ever going to pop. I mean, I can't tell you when you're living in this era and everything is going crazy, which is almost like it feels right now, no one thinks it's ever going to end. So then the bubble bursts. And what does that mean? Well, in 1 month, in the year 2000, of March of 2000, over $1 trillion is lost in the market. So my second piece of advice is to save some money. Not to spook you, but if you look at recessions over the last 50 years, you can see that they happen every 5 to 10 years. In fact, since the longest time we've been tracking when recessions occur, the longest distance between recessions has been 10 years, and this is back through the 1700s. So it's a sine wave. It grows, it comes down. It grows, it comes down. Last recession we had was in June of 2009. Now, I'm not going to predict that we're going to be in a recession when I come see you next year. That is just not what I'm going to say. I'm just saying that is probably going to happen in the next few years. And then it's going to come back, and it's going to get even better than it was before. But what's important is for you to save. And I know you all have student loans and you all have other debts, and you want to buy that car because you haven't been able to, and you're going to get your first job, and that's what you're going to want to spend your money on. What I'm saying is keep what you can aside, because when change comes and you have to make another career move, you're going to have more options if you give yourself the time to make the right decision. And that time comes from having a little bit of savings that you can lean on so you're not jumping to a poor career choice. So do your best to save while you're doing all those other things in your life, because change will come even when you don't expect it. And I can tell you I've lived through 3 of these dumps now. And every time we don't think it's going to come. And it does. So save what you can so that you can live through those lean times and still make the right career moves. So what happens to me is I go to Sun for a 3-month summer internship. I pick up skills in areas I wasn't expecting to pick up skills. I have a CEO business of which Sun is one of many customers. And then the dot-com era ends, and I call Sun and I say, hey, I need a job. I've been able to be a CEO without insurance or benefits because my husband has a job that has those things. But now, with the $1 trillion that's lost in the stock market, nobody has a job, or at least that's what it feels like. So I decide that I'm going to go to Sun, call them up, and say, hey, let me come work for you full time. My husband decides to go to a company that is really not doing well. And so between the two of us, I say, hey, I'll work at Sun, you work where you want to go, and one of us will have insurance for these 3 kids. And the company he decides to go to is called Apple. I did not think at the time, had you told me, that his company would be the one that would survive and Sun would be the one that would get bought by Oracle. Could not, I would have never bet on that. Apple was being bailed out by Microsoft. They were, Microsoft was being called a monopoly, so they were trying to keep Apple alive so it didn't look like that was the only gig in town. They had 4% of the PC market. Their stock was like $11. Never knew it, right? So between the two of us, we decide we're going to go to work. So when you're deciding where you're going to work, it's not just the stock price, the equity, right? These are the three things that I always use as my guiding principle when deciding on my career opportunities. Number one, are there growth opportunities for me to continue to learn in my area of interest? Whatever my area of interest is, and it's going to be different for everybody, can you learn more about that in the job? Learning has always been critically important to me. You can see from my kids, push down that need to study and learn, and then go into the world and continue that learning. Number two, do I admire the people I work with? This includes my peers, my managers, the executives. I need to admire them. I need to believe they'll be successful. I need to believe they can teach me something. I need to want to be with them. If I go to work every day and I have to work with people that I don't like, I don't want to be at that job. And the third is, can I afford this job? So sometimes you can have a great career opportunity with people that you like and you can't pay your bills. Or sometimes it takes so many hours to work at that job, you can't have the rest of your life. So afford doesn't always mean monetarily afford. It's can you afford to fit this into everything else that's going on? And if you can't afford it, then it's probably not for you right now. So all three of those things held for me when I took the job at Sun. I could learn a ton from them. They were growing like crazy. I liked the people, and I knew that they were awesome because I'd already worked with them as contracting and as intern, and then as a CEO working with them. And they paid the insurance bill that I needed them to pay. So that's where I jumped. So my 3-month internship at Sun turned into 16 years. Did not know that was going to happen. So why would you ever stay at a job for that long? Well, the key is to build the job around what you like to do, and then to hire people under you to take the stuff that you no longer think is a growth opportunity. So I like to do things once so I learn it. I like to do things the second time so that I can make it better. But the third time, I start to get pretty bored with it. And so I like to hire someone and teach them to do it, and then go on to something else. And that's always how I've built my career. So I start out as an Internet Protocol Product Release Manager. So that means those protocols that I was testing and those bake-offs, now my job is to embed it in the software and get it released. Then I was responsible for more protocols. Then I was responsible for more software. Then I was responsible for program managers that I hired to do that for me because that got kind of mundane, right? Releases just keep coming. And I wasn't learning that much. So I was like, well, I'll teach you, and then I can go do something else. And so what else did I do? Well, then I started managing the labs where these things were being tested. I started managing the business applications and the tools and the capital expenditures that were involved with making sure that we got the equipment that needed to then test the protocols that we would then release. So it all kind of fits together, but this is how you get that done. My first rule is you always want to look like you have the capacity to take on additional work. If you are running around with your hair on fire because, oh, you're so busy, you can barely believe that you've got to get all that stuff done, what happens is management has another opportunity and they say, oh, we can't give it to so-and-so. She's already maxed out. She's too busy. And so before I got to that point where I knew I was going to get maxed out, because I was at a growth company, which always meant I always had budget, I would hire someone to take on that work, And then I would have capacity to take on the new assignment. So, number one, have capacity to pick up new work. Number two is look around. When you're at a growing company, there's all sorts of work that has to get done. Sometimes it's work that management doesn't even see, but you see it. You're working with people that you like and admire, and they're pointing out gaps and flaws and ways that processes need to be improved or software needs to be written that you can help with. So you look around and you volunteer, and all of a sudden, your job, which was supposed to be this little bit on a job description, turns out to be an entire department that you're running. So, in that time, I made the job interesting. I was working with a bunch of people that I liked. I grew my single individual contributor role into a department of over 80 people. It was awesome. I loved it. Problem was, no one loved to buy Sun equipment, so I left. The market started to shrink. Sun was going to get bought by Oracle. Things were coming down. I was telling you about how difficult it is to work in an environment that's being condensed, if you will. So I started to call some friends up that I knew who were also at these other bake-offs and people that were also building machines, and I decided to go work at NetUp. So at NetUp, I started out as a program manager. So remember, I was a CEO, and then I came back as an individual contributor, built that team to 80 people. NetUp calls and they say, we just need an individual contributor, but we need someone to run the advanced development group, which is a research and development. It's like IBM Labs, right, but in a smaller scale. You don't have any direct reports, but you can learn a ton. We're growing like crazy, and you can be with people that you like. So I'm like, okay, let's do it. Not the career ladder you're expecting, right? That's why there's a jungle gym there. My career has never gone in a straight direction. I've always taken twists and turns, but at this point, I now have some pretty strong confidence that it's going to be okay. I've built my own business. I've built department to 80 people from one. I'm not going to worry about the fact that this is an individual contributor role, because all three of my questions are yes answers. So I go to NetUp, and I start running this R&D lab, this advanced development group, and it starts growing. And the person in charge of that group is the CTO. And then he says, I want to build a CTO office. So we start putting together a CTO office. Again, managing program managers, communication strategy, financial planning, because remember, I've been doing budgets, new product development. This, again, turns into an enormous scope of work. In fact, by the time I'm done with this job, I'm spotted by the executive vice president of products, which is engineering, 5,000 people in his org. He wants me to come be his chief of staff. All from somebody who said, but I only have this job for you. But growing, I'm ready to go. So my next piece of advice is to trust in your abilities and follow your passion. Because if you can trust in what you're doing and you're surrounding yourself with really smart people and things are growing and booming, it's going to be okay. So have that confidence. As I'm putting together the CTO office, as I'm working with the EVP of products, I'm noticing that the percentage of women in engineering is not what I'm expecting. It's declining. When I was here at UCLA, it was 1 in 3 women were in engineering. It's now returning close to that number, but it's gone through a dip, right? It's gone down about maybe 15, 18%, so maybe 1 in 6, and then it's coming back. And what I wanted to do was create a women in technology group, and so this is what I did at NetUp to bring the women together who were there in engineering so they wouldn't leave the field. I started with a round table of about 12 women in Sunnyvale, which was our headquarters, and by the time I left, we had 1,100 women around the world. Because other groups wanted to join. I found volunteers in different sites to run the Women in Technology group, and there we had video conferencing, so we would have big meetings where all the other cities were on video conference, and we would talk to each other about what it's like to be a woman in engineering. It was a fantastic job. I loved it. So what happens? Why would I leave this job? Well, make sure I'm not off track here. Yeah. So the next thing that happens is I leave the job at NetUp and I go work at a nonprofit called AnitaB.org. And the question is, well, why would I do that when everything was going so well? It wasn't because the company wasn't growing. It wasn't because I didn't like the people. But what happened was I could no longer afford the job. And the reason is because at home, those 3 kids I was telling you about, the 2 older ones went off to school and they went off pretty far away. And the little guy was at home and he wasn't doing so well. So I talked to my husband. Turned out Apple wasn't the bust I thought it was going to be. He actually had a very positive career path as well. And between the 2 of us, we talked it out. And I said, you know, I think I want to be the one that stays home for a little bit. So I went to nonprofit work. So that means more flexibility, more time at home, less pay, but it was enough. And so I switched to nonprofit and worked at Anita-B. That Women in Tech program that I started as a volunteer, all of those stories that I heard running those 1,100 women through meetups and networking opportunities and taking them to the Grace Hopper celebration and taking them to other conferences, those stories I brought with me to this nonprofit, and I was able to really contribute to their mission. So once again, I started out as an individual program manager, redefining what they called the partner program, so that's working with other companies that are also interested in increasing the number of women in their companies. And I added a whole bunch of stuff. And then I already told you about what I do. I could never have predicted that that's the way my life was going to go. And I have a couple more things that I want to share with you, and then I'll take questions. The first is to let you know that all of my career moves were made by staying current with technology as it changed rapidly and staying in touch with my network, which were the people who got me every job that I've had since I left UCLA. Other than starting my own business, which frankly I started because I had people I knew that were going to give me business, every job that I have had has been because I knew somebody who knew me. They knew what I did, they knew what I was strong with, and they recommended me, and that's how I got the next job. It wasn't through LinkedIn recommendations, it wasn't through posting my resume to a billion online job sites. It's someone who knew someone who knew someone. So, my first recommendation is every single person in this room should be connected to every single person in this room. I don't know how you all do it. I don't know if you have a mailing list or if you sign in when you come in through the door or if you Snapchat each other. I don't know what you do. But you all are going to be leaders in dozens of companies. And you all know what it was like to learn what you learned here. And you're going to be the strongest advocates for the next classes that come in and for each other. The people that I knew at NetUp, they all went to dozens of companies since I was there. So now I know people at all the other companies, and that's what's going to happen here. So any chance that you have to share contact information and to share your stories and stay connected, even starting now, will be extremely important as you go forward. It's also important to network and learn, and as you know, I'm going to give a plug for the Grace Hopper celebration. This is for women in technology. If you can't come with your university, there's a way to come as a volunteer. It's called a Hopper. Those applications are still open through May 30th, and Hoppers volunteer for about 8 hours, but then they also have a free ticket. Travel's not covered, but at least you can get in to the celebration, and then you can go through the career fair and see those 300 companies that are looking to hire. But let's say you can't do either one of those. There's a lot of men here. Maybe the Grace Hopper celebration isn't your cup of tea. The Anita Borg Institute, or AnitaB.org, spends an entire year tracking technology trends to understand what will be on the agenda for the next year, and that information is posted online. So I put some links here, and I'm happy to share these slides with whoever wants them. you are able to look online and see what we're tracking. Blockchain, autonomous vehicles, whatever else is current. Those were things we discussed years ago, right? So look online and see what the tracks are and see the descriptions of what we're studying. And if something looks interesting to you, dig deeper. There's so many resources that you can find, videos, lectures, discussions, books, information. Feel free to look through that. You can also look at past keynotes. All the videos are posted. So you can watch keynotes from years and years ago, hear what they have to say. And then we also give out Abby Awards, which are excellence awards for women in tech. Their stories are posted online and their videos are posted online. So you can certainly get information on the latest and greatest just from your computer. So stay current. And then for all the women, if you're feeling as if you're going into a job where you're not of the majority, and that's probably going to be most the case if you're going into computer science or computing or some STEM-related field, I think it's very important to form a community and reduce the feeling of isolation by having that group of supporters. So women leave tech careers at twice the rate of men. We know that, and most likely it's because they're not represented with enough of a percentage that makes them feel comfortable. So surround yourself with allies, build support groups, watch videos of inspiring stories. There are many, many, many leaders in engineering who are supporters of women in tech, and those are what we call allies. There are also men here that would be your supporters as well, and they would be supporting you through your careers. Just a couple days ago in the primaries, there was a story, I think this was, I pulled this from the Wall Street Journal, that basically said Tuesday was another big night for Democratic women. So we are seeing the tides turn, not just in politics, in Hollywood, in technical careers. You've already seen it in medicine and in other areas. Bioengineering's 50-50, environmental engineering's 50-50 in a lot of cases. So if you're feeling as if tech is the place to leave, I encourage you to reevaluate, reach out to people who can support you, because at this time, there's never been a better time for women in tech. So that's my story. It's not what I thought it was going to happen. When people reached out to me to speak today, I was at AnitaB.org. I was responsible for the Grace Hopper celebration, among some other things. But I actually don't work there anymore. Last week, I started a new job. I'm now at Facebook, and I am a program manager. Thanks. Do you guys have any questions? Yes. Oh, sure, all the time. So the question was, have you ever put yourself forward for a responsibility and then management came back and said, no, thank you? I mean, I think that that's actually very common. I think what's uncommon is that women worry about being told no thank you, and sometimes men are not so worried about that. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there and to have a failure or two to know what the possibilities are. So I would encourage you to put your hand up and say, yes, I'm ready for that. And if it's not the case, that time, keep putting your hand up. And what will happen is people will remember that you're interested in doing more than what you're doing. And then when something comes up that's going to be a fit, they'll think of you. Yes?
So you mentioned that you got an MBA, and it seems like every time you start at a new company, you start off as a program manager.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, does the MBA help more with that, or more like once you have the job, being able to grow your department?
Right. So the question is, how does the MBA help inspection, especially in my career? So after I stopped working directly with technology through the software release program,
I pretty much only used skills that were business related. Because you saw procurement and financials and operations, that's all MBA stuff. That's not electrical engineering stuff per se. So I would say that I don't want you to come away from this thinking, yeah, every time I get a job I should be a program manager. That's not the point. But the point was I was willing to take the chance to start over because I built up enough confidence that I knew that I could build departments. But the MBA education actually helped me expand the responsibilities beyond tech because I knew the business side as well. And so I actually spend all of my time now working in operations. My role is business operations program manager. I support 2 groups of 1,000 employees. Facebook has about 25,000 employees, so about 10% of the employee base is in my group. So it's funny, the program manager title is actually varies from company to company, but it is all MBA stuff that I'm using at this point. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Question?
So you talked about program managers. So I'm just wondering how did you manage to juggle between like family and work, especially during the time when your kids were young?
So, how did I balance family and work? So I'll tell you how I did it, but I don't know how common it is. So, when I was a CEO, I could just do whatever I wanted. And when I went to Sun, I asked if I could leave early every day, and that worked well. But when I went to NetUp, I had a stipulation that I would leave at 2 o'clock every day, which, I mean, I don't know how many people do that, but I basically said, if you want me to come work for you, I'm going to leave at 2 o'clock every day. And I left at 2 o'clock for like 8 years. But I didn't finish working. I just left at 2, pick kids up, go back online, they're doing their homework, I'm doing my homework. So I mention that because sometimes it feels completely unreasonable to ask for something like that. But if you don't ask, how are you going to know? I also had a very strong reputation for getting things done, and it didn't matter where I was when I got stuff done. So that's probably why I was granted that privilege. It was awkward at first. I got a lot of people saying, well, you know, how come she gets to leave it too? And they're like, just ping her, she's online. But that's how I did it. I know a lot of other people, they just set their limits and their boundaries, whether it's 2, 5, 7, whether they come in at noon, or so the spouse takes the morning and they take the afternoon. But companies right now are having a very difficult time keeping tech workers or hiring tech workers because there's so much tech demand. You can make requests and negotiate pretty strongly. But that's how I did it. Other questions? Yes?
Curious, how long did it take you to make this
How long does it take to plan Grace Hopper? So we start Grace Hopper for the next year, the August prior, so 15 months. 15 months to plan Hopper. So we started on 2018 in June of 2017. It's really hard because you're trying to work on this year, but you have to think about next year. So try and get the team to like shut their mind off. But yeah, you can't do it right after. There's not enough time. You have to start before. Okay. All right. Well, for all of you who asked questions, come to the front. I have a Facebook sticker for you.